capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's
Zach.
a tough one.
This
I
is
know,
really hard.
and maybe
Yes.
comparing numbers is not Jeremy Strong's. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight, myself and Dan Platt of the Three Left Show and What's Left in Albany are going to be continuing on in our series about utopias. And this time we're taking a look at a particular tool that is pretty important for keeping everyone equally accountable, and that's restorative justice. Yeah, how you doing tonight, Dan?
You seem well breasted. How much do you know, Zach?
I know basically the rudiments of it.
Hmm.
Basically, both parties must consent to it. It's not ever something that you can just haul someone into a courtroom and go through the process of. The point more than anything is kind of like it with truth and reconciliation, is to admit what was done and make restitution to the victim, not just like monetary compensation, but you allow the victim to say what would make you whole again, and then they will give
Hey,
you
you're
an
ruining
answer.
it. I'm
Oh,
kidding.
sorry. Don't want to give too
You're
much
no,
away.
you got the basics, and that's kind of what we're going to
Yeah.
go into. But we're going to go into why it matters to know these basics and beyond. Um, so we've been covering some economic tools, organizing tools, as you labeled them. Why? Because if we're going to be utopian socialists, if we're going to build a better world, we actually
Mhm.
need to present what the alternative is. In 2020, and being, trying to fight police and prisons, we're really, there was a lot of focus on the policing aspect. How do people go into the criminal justice system?
Right.
But not, but then of course it leads to broader questions and challenges that leftists or baby leftists are terrible at answering. What do you want to replace it with? How do we replace punitive judgment process? We say people don't
Right.
deserve to be killed for being a criminal or committing a crime. I'm like, well, what are we supposed to do? We
Yeah.
can't
What do you
just
do instead?
lock everyone up. We had to be a prison planet, right? Or these people are just bad. They're just bad. They're dangerous, and it's just
Yep.
like,
You just gotta
don't
be
you don't
taken
you
out of the
care
gene
about
pool.
the law abiding, good people, good people, and so you get into,
Right.
we want to we can draw out all of the inequalities and the racism and so on from these perspectives, but what do we replace it with? How do we really show just how morally bankrupt it all is? And the impact it has, that once people start interacting with a non-alienated form of justice, their minds will change, but they have to interact with it first, which means that we
Absolutely.
have to start doing it. We have to put it in the public, and not just say we have to stop police from killing people. And like, well, what else are they supposed to do? What else are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Because they have no other conception.
Hmm.
And so on. So we're going to start with the first link, which is, so I do not know the details. Maybe I'll review them, maybe because I'm mentally ready. I don't know. From other streamers, because it's national. That's the national news we're focused on, the Nashville school mass shooting, because it was a trans person who did it. Um,
Supposedly. Yeah.
Supposedly, see, I don't
Yeah.
know, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's being used for
There's
propaganda,
some
regardless,
speculation about
regardless of
why
who you
they're
are.
identifying that way, but
it's
yes.
it's it's still made about guns, but of course, if and we don't want to fall, as lefties, we don't want to fall in the trap of gun control versus not gun control, though
Hmm.
some of my comrades do so.
Yeah.
um but I try to be as neutral as possible. I even lie, I think, a little bit and say the Green Party does not have a actual position on gun control. I guess we
Hmm.
do, maybe
Yeah.
as far as assault weapons go,
Hmm.
but that's just because we're not a revolutionary Marxist org, so we're not going
Yeah.
to say the proletariat needs to be armed to overthrow the government. We're
Yes.
electoral party. We're not really doing that.
Well, and
So we don't have the Socialist Rifle Association position.
mhm,
Or if we do, it is for the fact that guns are defensive and assault weapons are not really defensive,
mhm,
as
yeah,
much as a rifle would be, because that's more about being precise, not spraying. Um, Spraying death. So there was a incident in Denver, East High School. They've had a rash of shootings, but there haven't been mass shootings, so they haven't been national news. So we're going to see a news report about that. It's post the emergency. This is the ABC affiliate. Doesn't really freaking matter, but we could go deeper and watch videos from the day, but I can just summarize it.
yeah,
A 17-year-old whose bag was being searched because it was part of their safety plan, part of basically the compromise of, we want to be able to provide the right to an education, but we're not going to ban everyone who's a perceived safety risk, because then once you're talking about perception or stereotyping, oh, they're in a gang, so
profiling, yeah,
we can't allow them in school. Basically, everyone is taking their education policy from Stand By Me, because that was an inspirational movie in the 80s, just like any other inspirational movie from the 80s, if they're an X or even millennial, maybe, but maybe not millennials, because millennials, our inspirational movies are in the 90s, and the 90s didn't
yeah,
have inspirational education movies that involved just locking students out of the school because they were involved, they'd been poor and thus needed to do criminal things. We're gonna save the good students was and we're gonna save them by having them pass standardized tests. So
yeah.
that was the,
Wow.
the message. Did you remember Stand By Me?
I don't know that I've ever seen it. No,
Okay.
but
Um,
yeah,
it's an interesting movie. I think it would make for a good leftist watch night, because it's not a leftist movie at all. It's very much a Reaganist kind of movie. But you basically have this hardliner black principal taking over the worst of the worst school, and all the students are pretty much illiterate, and he turns it around by basically being tough.
oh God,
Tough, but
tough
we're
but
tough love.
fair.
We're doing this for the, we're gonna like give you confidence by being tough and whatever, um, and basically saying like, all of you, you're our failures. We're not gonna be nice anymore, kind of thing, and include the teachers. And it's basically like the first half of the movie. The act is basically this guy coming in and lecturing everybody on how much they suck. And it's like, it's not because you're not underfunded. It's not because this community has been completely. It's basically a sacrifice owning capitalism. No, it's you. It's all you. And he turns it around, and it ends with the results that like half the school actually passed like the standardized test. Anyway, that's a tangent. So
Could
let's
that
get
be a
going.
different? Could there be a different name that you're thinking of? Because this does not look. I'm trying to
Stand
look
By
for it.
Me.
It's not coming up.
Was it
What
called
I'm
something
finding
else? I'm pretty sure it's called
is
Stand By Me, but maybe. Um,
so what's coming up is a coming of age drama that's based on a Stephen King novel.
oh
So
yeah, no, that's Stand By Me. What was it called? It was a high school, like a Chicago high school. Pretty much, it was an early '90s movie. Um, Pretty sure. Well, I'll leave it alone. I described a
yeah,
movie
we'll
that
come back. Stand and Deliver. Could that be it?
no,
No.
not Stand Deliver. Maybe Stand wasn't. I thought it had Stand in the title, but it was. I don't know if Morgan Freeman is the principal or a different. No, it was a different guy. I thought it was Stand By Me. Um, hmm. Anyway, but there's the third act conflict is that like one of the drug dealers
Kind of
comes to
sounds like.
shoot him.
So
Uh,
the Stand and Deliver says, based on a true story of a mathematics teacher goes to a school in East LA full of Latino students from working
no, no,
class
no, no, no.
families.
That's the
No?
other that's the other cliched, like teacher saving a class of delinquents. but this was like
Oh,
a
yeah.
whole school, so there was a little bit like more structure to it, and not like a personal story.
Okay.
But okay, we need to move
Well,
forward.
we'll revisit it some other time then. All right, let's get into the first video. So we'll get some background on this Denver shooting first.
And you're gonna love
Breaking
their
news.
guests. This is
Out
a
of Denver,
hard-hitting
Colorado,
conversation
where
here.
police say they are right now searching for a student who opened fire at a high school.
Denver police report 2 staff members were wounded in this shooting at East High School. One is listed as serious but stable condition. We're told the other is in critical condition and in surgery right now. ABC's Alex Stone joins us now from our Los Angeles bureau, along with our contributor, retired NYPD Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce. Alex, tell us what's going on. Police say the suspect was a student at this school. What else are you learning about him?
That's right, Terry. They're looking for him right now. Police say they know who he is. This is a student who was apparently under a plan that they had in place where they searched him every day for weapons. Well, today when they went and looked for weapons, he was in a secluded area away from other students. 2 faculty members were with him, and police say he pulled out a gun, shot those faculty members, and then ran away. The faculty members, they were injured, seriously injured, we understand, from Denver General Hospital, Denver Health. They are getting treatment right now, one in surgery, the other awake and talking. You can see from these images all the parents that came out looking for word on what was going on in the school, if their students were safe. All students are safe, but police say that this was a student they had been searching every day for quite a while. Today, he brought a gun and opened fire.
Okay, which begs the question, and Bob, let me take it to you. There was a plan in place to search this student every day. I mean, this seems crazy. It's like they knew this was a problem, so he had to be searched. Why let him come to school?
Do you want to answer that, Zach?
It's because he still is a human being who deserves an education. Like,
he has a right to an education, but these rights get in the way of safety, Zach.
God.
You get a sense that when it comes to safety and punishing criminals, human rights are pretty much a abstract
it is amazing.
like fallacy to most liberal, to most Americans.
It seems most people, they're just quick to jettison any sort of rights if it someone just crosses some line that they feel is morally abhorrent.
Now, if someone in this 4-way, fest here were to say he has a right to an education, he's he's not an active threat every time, but he's an active, it's just we just don't want him to be armed, right? If he's not armed, it doesn't matter.
Right.
He's not actively threatening everybody all the time. He would have been expelled a long time ago if that was the case. But let's say he was involved in some gang stuff. So, and it's also what the ignorance in these 4 white people is that they do not understand and they do not report about why it is so dangerous in poor neighborhoods that everyone needs to be strapped, like the This Is America from Childish Gambino. I got to strap, I got to carry.
I got to carry it. Yeah, right.
This is the normal. I don't know how long. Maybe it's kind of always been this way, but it is more risky not to be armed when you're just walking through your hood than to get caught by the police with a gun, or in some instances be caught with a gun at school. The safety plan is like, we don't want you bringing a gun in here. So maybe like they were carrying, but then they have to stash it somewhere near the school. Right. That's not good either. They don't want their gun getting swiped, especially by someone who maybe has it out for them. But these are all hypotheticals and contexts that these white people do not fucking understand. And I don't know if they ever could, but it's not. Maybe they could if it was brought up.
Not likely.
It just needs to be brought up in these public, nationally broadcast conversations, and it needs to be brought up more than just by a token activist or public official, which we'll see in the next video. But yeah. So let's continue. So there's issue number 1.
Just clearly, there's something going on here that hasn't been explained.
Yeah, there you go.
Further, this is from a state that is no stranger to this kind of violence. Look at Aurora, Columbine, you name it, Boulder, Colorado. We see these things
South
all
Park.
the time coming out of Colorado.
Very violent
This was a
place.
plan. He was searched. He had to have been known he was going to be searched. So we're going to figure out why he did it on this specific day, and then took off. So this is a big issue. He has a big manhunt for this young male right now, and all resources are going in that
Young
direction.
male.
Hopefully, it ends peaceably with no problems to anyone else.
You're struggling not to say young black
Absolutely.
man.
Alex, what else can you tell us about, I guess there was a school shooting at this school just last month. Students were rallying for the return of school resource officers who were removed in 2020.
I will go out on a limb and say that's a blatant lie.
Yeah.
I watched, after hearing and watching this, I quickly clacked to search for any vids on the protest that he's referring to. And police resource officers were not mentioned in that video. It was basically a march for gun control. It was a crowd, a protest of students. They marched from their school to the Capitol, pretty long way actually, but they lobbied. The whole group wasn't allowed into the Capitol, of course, but the few signs that were there were about protect children, not guns. But maybe they should be more specific and say gun makers, because that's who they're really fighting. And it was about safety and gun control, more or less, if any policy were to result. But it was about gun control. No mention of we need the cops back. We want the cops back. They didn't make it about the cops. He's making it about the cops because safety is mentioned. The only thing that makes you safe is the police.
Right. Yeah. That is their one answer for everything.
In the white minds. So just want to call out that as a complete falsity there.
Yeah.
You know why these are called anchors, right?
Why is that?
Because they drag us down.
Got him.
20. Tell us about this school and about that situation.
Yeah, and to the point of just a moment ago, Terry, of what they're doing right now, we know that they are executing a search warrant right now at the home of this young man. There is a Bearcat outside of that home as we speak, an armored vehicle where they are either about to go in or have gone in. Figure out, is he hiding there? They know where he lives. They know who this student is, that they had a lot of contact with him. The other shooting, that was a couple of weeks ago in February, and
the student had his own car, by the way.
Okay.
So it isn't mentioned is that he had his own car, and
So that's how he got away. Is that it?
Well, I'm not going to spoil it yet, but let's get
that they
towards
want
the end
school resource officers. They were removed from Denver campuses in 2020. It was near the campus. 16-year-old boy who was injured in that one.
They're making it about the
but
cops,
students say they want more.
They're showing this direct
So, Alex,
correlation,
what
as
else
if
do
there
we
was
know
no
about-
shootings before the police were taken out? But that was the whole point. The police were not stopping any violence.
Yeah.
So
because
that's why they were taken out.
Almost never do.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And the school board recognized that, and enough of the school board are woke and based.
The two faculty members that were injured, their condition, who they were these the ones that were supposed to pat him down?
You're right. These were the two who were patting him down, who were searching him in that moment. There was no school resource officer on campus. Denver police, the chief today saying, we don't have any of those. The school district took them out of schools. Similar to what we heard last week in Santa Rosa, California, Northern California.
Like if a cop was patting him down, then there would be no shooting, that he wouldn't turn around and shoot the cop. If anything, it would make it more likely. But in this case, it was two, they call them deans, maybe they're vice principals. I don't know if they have the same rank as that.
Where there was a stabbing on campus, no school resource officer, calls there to bring them back as well. The two staff members, we understand they are seriously injured. One went into surgery.
I think they called maybe parents. There are certain parents that are calling to bring them back.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if it is the students, so what? Are high school students expected to know what the best public safety policy is? Yeah.
Well, here's where authoritarians are always very populist when it comes to more use of authority. People cry out for order in law and the empire, and that's what people really want. They want order, and we're ready. We're standing by to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
The other awake and talking, they were deans at the school, but beyond that, we don't know much more.
And Bob, I'm just wondering about the other tools that community might have in other communities. Look, school discipline became a very bad word for a long time.
Here's the next step. So first, they make it about the cops, right? And then, I think this plays out in various conversations, and it needs to be stamped out, of course, by us lefties. They're going to turn it into a discipline problem. This is about discipline.
Yeah.
When you think of discipline, you think of punishment. At least in the conservative
punishment, suspensions.
The white mind. I'm going to say just the white mind, because I think conservatives can still be like compassionate and whatever. We make it about whiteness. We make it about being authoritarian and pressing others.
Yeah. What other tools could they have at their disposal? I don't know. Have a
whipping.
School breakfast program.
No. He's talking about punishments. So
no. I know. I'm just saying.
And the cop and the retired cop. So he's not even like a middle range, middle-aged cop. No, he's been at this since
he's been out of it. Yeah.
Since the 60s, when they could really just kill anybody.
Right. Yeah. Let's just bring back corporal punishment. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, he brings it back. He says like, "Oh, am I going too far by saying this is obviously corporal punishment stopped all prevented all violence."
Right.
But I think it's just a matter of like, if we're not doing the violence, then the people under our charge will be doing it, and that will be worse or somehow less just.
Yeah, let's never figure out why they're doing violence, but we'll just stop them from doing it. That sounds like a perfect plan.
That's long time for a good reason. People discovered it was disclosed. It became evident that it was racially imbalanced and things like that. But things like suspensions, expulsions, keeping kids separate for detention, what we used to call detention, those are tools. Do you think, or am I barking up the wrong tree here, that the dilution of the school's ability to discipline students is a safety issue?
Perry, that plays into it. You're 100% right. I couldn't agree more. Not only that, in many states, they've taken the police department out of control of school resource officers, which I believe is an issue, is a problem. So you want someone highly trained in there who knows how to communicate well and can see and talk to other students.
Teachers and vice principals, they're not trained at all. They weren't trained.
No, they have no training.
If anything,
they don't know how to handle students.
If anything, it's the opposite. The cops are actually the opposite of trained when it comes to dealing with kids. So they're barely able to deal with adults. So he says they're great communicators. Oh yeah.
Oh God, notorious for just the level head of calm conversation.
What's going on? Clearly, it looks like he's a recent transfer. He's not feeling like he.
So we're gonna add some. This is the outsider. It's not the school's problem.
Well, no. This is the only time that he actually mentions context. That there's like that there are issues here. That it's not just like the punishing him or what he's saying. He's feeling like he doesn't belong. Well, obviously, searching him every day for guns is obviously alienating him more, right? But it's the compromise. The safety plan was like searching him was the compromise in the eyes of the administrators, or other students. Yeah, and of course the home life, but he transferred in. Who knows? Like his home life is likely terrible, but of course we just don't know. But he has his own car, so maybe he's more independent because hell, when it comes to parents, if you ask a troubled teen or college age, but someone a hood rat about their parents, they will close up. They will, because they'll have nothing to say. Or nothing, like it's just nothing good, no good thoughts.
Right. Yeah. All right, let's finish this up here.
He belongs there. He has behavioral issues. This is just a recipe for disaster. And the school resource officers should have been there. The students were asking for it. That's unusual right there. You look at Oxford, Michigan with Ethan Crumley.
It is unusual.
Just 2 years
Almost
ago.
so unusual,
7
probably
dead.
okay.
I mean, these things we have to put people in place where we can prevent this. And it's a shame that this had to happen. These men were shot. Obviously, one's critical. Let's all pray for him. But now they're on the manhunt. At some point, they're going to take that door if they don't get dialogue. They have a Bearcat out there now, so it looks like they're marshaling.
What's that? Twice. This is a kid. It's 17, and he keeps using the word manhunt.
Yep.
Used it like in the intro.
Oh, I'm sure it's intentional.
Or subconscious, but that's the thing. The guy's like, oh, it's been shown that these punishments were racially motivated, but weren't they not effective?
Yeah, but they should have been done more. That was the problem.
What a fucking jackass. What a fucking jackass.
Resources to do that, to see if he's in there, to see if he's still alive, see if he's okay. So at some point, they're going to take that door and find out exactly what's going on.
And Alex, do we know if this same young man, I missed this, if he was involved in the other shooting that happened at that school? And then my other question is, the students, how did they, I'm assuming law enforcement got everyone else out safely, got them to a safe spot, parents came and picked them up?
They did. No indication that this student was related to what went on a couple of weeks ago. That was near the school. 16-year-old student in that case was killed. There have been these calls for changes to be made. To your other point, they were in their third period classrooms.
That's racist.
They locked everybody down.
That, this kid obviously committed the other murder.
Yeah.
But it would have been like she's thinking there's an outrage here that the school basically, like, there was someone who attempted murder or committed a murder, and the school, because of the woke mob, had to keep letting him go to school. That's like the
15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, they began getting students out. They are now reuniting with their parents. You see in these images here, those were worried parents who were outside. They were waiting. They wanted to know something. They are reuniting right now.
All right, Alex Stone, let us know if you get any new details on that suspect, as police are just outside his home there, and if they are able to apprehend him. Keep us updated. Bob, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you both.
All right, so there's that one.
So I think the cop mentioned, I hope, we'll find a manhunt. Now, spoiler, it did not end peacefully.
No.
The teen is dead. His name was Justin, I think. And he basically drove the car out to the county line and went out, parked it roadside, and ended himself, because obviously after shooting the two vice principals and everything else, my life is over. It's over. Yeah. And so the next video will go into that. Now we'll get a sane response in the form of the vice president of the school board there. And so he's kind of brought on for a full interview to answer for like this, what's going on and the school board's and the school district's policy. So we'll get into that. Sorry, it's a whole half an hour. I think we could stop.
Joined today for an extended conversation by Denver School Board Vice President Ante Anderson. Welcome to Next.
Thank you for having me.
You said that the Denver School Board brought school resource officers back to DPS because Mayor Michael Hancock was going to force them in through an executive order. What can you tell us about that?
Prior to the executive session that the Denver School Board commenced on Thursday, the Denver School Superintendent, Dr. Alex Marrero, told myself and Denver School Board President Xochitl Gaitan that this is happening, regardless if the school board meets today and votes in the affirmative of returning SROs or says we're not going to. And he expressed that this would be happening because the mayor of Denver, Michael Hancock, had an executive order drafted and ready to be signed, deploying SROs in the same way that he did with COVID vaccinations. Those were the exact words of the superintendent prior to the executive session and were reiterated to the full board during that time.
So again, not a hypothetical, not a maybe, but if DPS didn't act, the superintendent told you the mayor would act.
He did.
Okay. And when you say that that was reiterated in executive session, reiterated by whom?
The superintendent.
By the superintendent. Okay. Mayor Hancock's office says your claim is false. His spokesman, Mike Strout, said there's no truth to Director Anderson's claim. So are you relying just on what the superintendent told you in this private meeting, or do you have other evidence the mayor was going to move on this?
I'm just relying solely on what the superintendent told his employers, and he seemed pretty adamant that this was going to be a reality. So much that if he repeated it to the board leadership and then repeated it to the full board, I'm pretty sure that the superintendent is not lying about this interaction with the mayor.
Gotcha. And are you going to get sideways with the board or the law by talking about what happened in executive session?
This is the only thing I am able to really disclose into executive session, only because it was told to me prior to the beginning of the executive session. So I can confirm.
And as you said,
it makes me really suspicious about executive sessions. I mean,
right.
certain executive sessions where something's being decided about, like, say you're getting voted onto the board or something like that.
Right.
You should be excluded from the session. But the executive session is like, oh no one's able to see what's in it. Because if it is public, I guess the person involved would know. But that's just sus. You know, these are public officials. They should be public meetings. Maybe I'm being an anarchist about it, but it's. I mean, certain decisions are like information shared that's confidential, and so it's usually for privacy reasons that meetings are kept private. But it's just odd considering just how, what public import these meetings have.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it was drilled pretty hard to us when I was in my urban studies classes and stuff that you don't meet with other people who are government officials, like even on a casual basis, and discuss anything that could be construed as a public meeting because, you don't want to get in trouble by keeping things from the public. So, yeah.
Yes. It's part of professionalism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marrero. So, do you disagree with the decision, or do you just not like?
I just find it odd that the mayor would. It's obviously a political calculation that the mayor wants the school district to do it, even though he's kind of threatening them to do it behind closed doors. So this board member, who is spoiler, is based in woke. You'll find out why, or how. He's anti-cop in the schools, but he frames it as like, we want to have a relationship with the cops. The data says, using data, and that's fine. It's not using political argument, but an actual you can be reasonable, but of course it maybe not matter because it goes against people's feelings. But when you are actually facts over feelings, you're usually labeled as a zealot anyway. Who's going against common sense and tradition.
Against common sense solutions.
Which is what this anchor here is sounds kind of reasonable with his opening question, maybe the way he frames things, but this is a grilling at the same time.
Gotcha.
No, I necessarily don't disagree with the decision. I understand that we need to respond to this moment by parents and students. And look, we've had thousands of emails, or I would say up to about 1,000 emails over the last week of folks asking for school resource officers in wake of the shooting at East High School. And then thereafter, we voted to accept the memorandum to the superintendent. We had families that started reaching out to say that was a reckless decision. So we're hearing from both sides of the issue right now, but I believe that right now, this is an opportunity to hopefully bring some calm and begin a long strategic plan to talk about school safety further with the superintendent and the district community.
You've been one of the strongest voices against SROs in schools. Have you changed your opinion?
I believe that the data supports my beliefs that we can have a positive relationship with law enforcement that's not necessarily inside of our actual school buildings. And right now we've seen through the data that's been provided by the Colorado Department of Education that on average we saw over 400 tickets a year prior to the COVID-19 pandemic being issued to black and brown children, predominantly black and brown children in the Denver public schools. And then thereafter, once we phased out SROs, it wasn't a unanimous vote to remove and then just throw them out. It was actually a phase out. It was, our middle school SROs stopped engaging at the end of the winter semester in 2020, and then our spring 2021, that's when our high school SROs were phased out. And in the 2021-2022 school year, we saw only 125 tickets. So the data supports that what we were pushing for was correct. It wasn't supposed to be anti-police, and I think that got misconstrued. However, I've reiterated numerous times to the
elected official, you cannot actually be anti-police and be elected, so there's a
right.
Keep in
It's
mind
a fine line
running for office, or you just have to hide your power level, as it were.
Right.
Which might
he's
be
doing
the
very
case
good keeping
which
with
might
the
be
data.
the case with this guy, because it surprised me what he asked him next. But what I am ignorant on is what he means by tickets. Are these cops writing students tickets? What tickets? How? Like they have to pay a fine? Ticket like they're
incident
going to
reports?
they have to go to court?
Yeah.
Like what does that mean? Because obviously, like, is a ticket a indication that like the justice is being served and they are being prevented from doing something worse when they get a ticket or a warning? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Paul Pazin, and now to Chief Thomas, I look forward to having a relationship with our law enforcement. I just want us to make sure that we don't have only 18 individuals.
I didn't say that relationship was going to be good. It could be adversarial.
Every police officer should be trained on how to engage with our young folks in our schools.
So you don't believe that you're anti-police?
No.
So in 2020 social justice protests, you described police officers as mother and said they were all corrupt. Do you still believe the police officers?
What does that got to do with anything they're talking about? Oh my God.
Well, it shows he's anti-police. I mean, if you're calling police motherfuckers and you're ACAB, a little bit of ACAB.
But he's bringing up stuff from years ago. Like, holy shit!
It is 3 years ago.
He's definitely going after him.
I don't know if he was on the board then, or maybe he was elected to school board because of the 2020 protests, and thus there was a wave to get him in.
Yeah. That's a good
But he's a
point.
VP, which kind of suggests he was there at least one full term.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But I think it's funny. Like,
I think that during the height of the George Floyd movement, we were being able to see that the practice of policing and the way that it was being contributed onto communities of color was something that was a corrupt practice. We've seen time and time again, from Tamir Rice to George Floyd to Sandra Bland, and the list continues to go on, where we've seen unarmed African American individuals murdered at the hands of law enforcement. That's a corrupt practice. When we talk about the all and the generalization, I think that was meeting in the heat of the moment. And I've, been able to work with law enforcement since the summer of 2020 and be able to create positive relationships. And I really think that we have a remarkable chief in Ron Thomas as our current chief of police.
Do SROs prevent violence in schools?
I don't necessarily know if they curb violence in our schools entirely, because we've now heard from the chief of police that in both instances of Luis Garcia's tragic murder and in the instance here, that an SRO wouldn't have been preventive in these two issues, because one was on 17th and Esplanade, and one was in a practice where it was a district practice, not something where an SRO would have ever been present. And I know this work because I was a district employee for a number of years before serving on the Denver School Board, and I was on the discipline team at North High School. So I've uncovered guns off of students before. I've been the one, there during many safety searches with our campus safety officers. Our practice at North was, whenever there was a dean or a restorative practitioner engaging with a student, we always made sure another individual from our campus safety team was there, because they would do the consented pat down of the student, and then they would have us search the bag. And so I'm not sure what happened at East, but I know that at least in our practice, we involved our campus safety team while also involving our disciplinary team, and our school resource officers were never there present to support in those searches whatsoever.
When you were doing pat-downs for weapons at North, did anybody teach you how to do that? Were you trained on how to do that?
Yeah, so I only searched through the bags. So that the pat-down of the student would be totally safety and security. I would only open the backpack and then give a thumbs up to our safety officer if the student was good to go after they consented. If they did not consent and said, I'm not okay with this today, then we would say, all right, that's fine. We need you to leave. They escort them out, and a parent would have to come back.
Boy about consent. And
Right.
You know, and that he's actually recovered guns himself and obviously wasn't shot in the process.
Yeah.
But I feel maybe this is a lib thing or once you're elected thing. I mean, it comes with activists too. I don't think being elected is what stops this, but there isn't or prevents this. But the ability to be stronger, to give a stronger answer when asked, do cops in schools prevent violence? To actually say no, the data does not
No, they
support
don't.
this, and the police chief,
Yeah,
and
that
then
would have been
say
a better
the
answer
police
I was
chief
hoping
also
for.
mentions that in these instances the SRO wouldn't matter.
Mhm.
That needs to be stressed so
Absolutely.
much. I kind of wish he was a little stronger, but maybe he's new to being grilled. And if I was in the hot seat, you know, I'd be
He's
nervous.
performing
Sound
fairly well,
nervous too.
but yeah,
Yeah,
he could have
and
been stronger.
of course, and that's something you practice and role play around. That
Yeah,
to
man.
say it doesn't matter. SROs don't help. They didn't help before, and they're not going to
Didn't help
help.
before, they're not
Putting
gonna
them
help now.
back is not. It's a security blanket that makes you feel better, but obviously it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the hard work is what it doesn't feel right, maybe, but again, eventually it does. If it you know, feels a lot better for everyone else involved, and that's what he's communicating or attempting to. It's not really listened to by this guy, but or the 1,000 emails that the school district got, where it's like, "Bring the cops back! What are you doing? How can you?" You know.
Yep.
Now, I doubt any of those emails had a reason why they think that, but that needs to be asked
Right.
for. From if you're in the seat of power, you do need to ask, and we should, and activists and the public should be able to be educated enough to provide an answer, to provide a reason why they think or feel what they do.
Absolutely. Should have something to back it up.
To be
Not just
conscious.
I feel better. Yeah.
I think one theme about like justice is, in any sense, is consciousness and maturity. You know, and you can't be mature without being conscious of your actions. I think much, you know, petty crime and whatever and punishment is all from a place of immaturity and not being conscious of why you are what you are and why you do the things you do. And the second you explore that, that's where the healing or the justice actually happens, and you actually prevent things. And that requires, and that in the other videos we'll go over that.
Very true. Very true.
We would then ask for the consent then with the parent, and the parent would be the one to look through the bag, or I would look through the bag, depending on who's more comfortable. And then we would still allow the campus safety officer to do the pat down if needed, because it's not like every student needs that. We're talking about in various instances. It could be weapons related, or it could be as small as a vape. And so these safety plans aren't always for weapons. We even do safety plans for students who get into physical altercations, and we need to ensure that they both know it's like a social contract that we're going to change the schedule up for both students. One student will go down hallway A, one student will go down hallway B, and that's a safety plan. So we use safety plans for a magnitude of reasons in Denver Public Schools, not just for weapons or because somebody has a high flyer on our radar.
I want to clarify some terminology you used. When you talk about the person at North doing the physical pat down, that was a campus safety officer, unarmed, not a Denver police officer,
Correct.
somebody on the district safety team.
Correct.
Should teachers and administrators who are doing pat downs be trained on how to do it safely?
You know, I strongly think that the trained professionals should be our campus safety officers. I actually don't believe that our teachers or our school administrators should be the one going hands-on with our students at any point, unless it is to, one, to deter violence and the immediacy, or two, if there's a, you know, we see kids get into fights all the time, and sometimes you got to, as an administrator, dean, restorative practitioner, paraprofessional, or an educator, you got to get in there to stop that in the interim until the campus safety officers arrive. They are trained in CPI holding and other mechanisms to stop, you know, physical altercations, but are also trained in how to appropriately do a quick pat down of a student if that's necessary.
I mean,
not all students.
All the employees shouldn't be guards, you know.
Yeah. Right.
Of the kids doing security checks and whatever. It's weird that he would ask, like, shouldn't everybody be trained in that? Maybe it's a way of turning around, like, oh, these activists say everyone needs more training. Well, don't you need more training to be, you know, to make sure people are safe? And doing
maybe
pat
that is his
downs
angle.
as if that's the chief tool in their toolbox. I also want to aside, in New York, we have a big problem with vapes in schools. I mean, you probably in the past it was smoking and what have you, but vapes
Sure.
are pretty, there's a whole whole student body using vapes, and a lot of principals are just responding by either locking bathrooms or
Oh, that's
conversely removing the doors on the bathrooms.
nice. Oh God.
And parents don't like this, so kids obviously don't like it. They want to fucking go to the bathroom. And so my office gets some calls about like, are they allowed to do this? Principals are locking bathrooms, and it's like, no, they can't lock the bathrooms.
That's good.
And the other side of it is like, then they install these sensors, smoke sensors, but they're so finicky, and vape smoke is so light that it's so there's these vape sensors are so sensitive. Steam from faucets sets them off, so they're not a help either. So there's really no good answer, I guess, to stop kids from vaping in the bathroom.
How about worry about more if they're learning and
yeah,
ready and able,
or just educate on like, yeah, it doesn't hurt as much as smoking. It's still hurting,
It's still hurting. It's
shouldn't
a
have to-
very unregulated product.
in a way that isn't as ham-fisted as the PSA about like, there's
Yeah.
metal in here. That's metal in your lungs.
Yeah.
Stupid fucking PSAs.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
It just
don't
seems
put
like there should
anything
be
in your
bigger
lungs
fish to
until you're
fry. Jeez.
24. Just wait until your brain's developed, and
Yeah.
then your body can take it.
Right.
You can't take it now. I mean, maybe your brain can't take the oppressiveness of schools. So, I mean, that's where things have to turn around in a lot of other ways before you can stop the physical interest in smoking and drugs and what have you. But it's like, well, the smoking is what makes the environment so bad. Not really. It's a symptom.
No.
But you love the cause.
That's right. Let's continue on.
Again, require that. And so I would hope that moving forward, we can shift back to the practice, at least that we used at North, was there's 2 adults present at all times. One's responsible for the bag, and if needed, the other one is responsible for the actual physical pat down of a student.
Should teachers know if students in their class have previously brought weapons to school or have been accused of violent crime? Should teachers know?
I don't necessarily know on this one, only because I want to ensure that we are maintaining a student's privacy. Because we, as I'm speaking as a former disciplinarian, as somebody who's worked in that field, we necessarily didn't tell all their teachers, hey, this is this kid's safety plan. We would give the teachers the high level about a student and just let them know, like, hey, if this student becomes escalated or anything, just immediately call us. But we really wouldn't get into the necessary, here's the details of everything that happened, only because we don't want to also have folks have a bias. I wouldn't want any of our educators to feel afraid of any of our students because of a mistake that they may have made outside on the weekend or something that has had implications that roll into school. But we often we'll see individuals utilizing this as a practice to fear our students, and nobody should be afraid of the students in Denver Public Schools. Folks have good days and folks have bad days, but we have to be able to ensure that we're providing a free and fair public education to all.
So I take it if teachers shouldn't
That's a
necessarily
phrase
know
used very often by educators in, let's say, left-leaning justice, that people have bad days and good days, and it leads to mistakes. That in a way, maybe I'm being strong here. Like, even someone committing a murder, it's a big fucking mistake with higher stakes. But it's still a mistake based on the circumstance. Or
Oftentimes, yes.
the
Done
need
in
to
the heat of
compete,
passion.
depending on the motive of the murder, of course. But it's, let's say it's competitive. You're killing someone for profit. You're killing somebody over emotion. These are things, that's context, and locking someone up indefinitely does not do anything about that.
Right.
It just feel better, but not really. As the 4th video will go into that. But anyway, let's keep going. I mean, I think we could skip to the the last third of this. That's where he kind of gets into the stuff that's more relevant. But like the next 10 minutes are just kind of talking about him just saying, basically going through ways we would talk about things, to questions of like, shouldn't they know that they're dangerous? And there was a student that was like attempted murder, and like, and he was still allowed to go to school because he has a right to, and that's what he communicates.
School to harm somebody before he
So
shot two
Austin
people.
Lyle.
That's just, for me, I think it's just trying to assume positive intent. I'm trying to assume positive intent with Austin. Maybe he had those intentions, but I'm hoping that that wasn't the case. But we'll never know because we lost a student to suicide.
I want to return to a question that I asked. I'm not sure if I heard
So
an
he
answer.
rephrases
What
everything
responsibility-
as, this was also a student suicide, and it was actually the primary harm, actually. The two deans that were shot, they'll recover. They're getting medical treatment. It's bad, but it's not, it's not an outrage to him or to us. The outrage is that another teen killed himself.
Right.
Because that's the final result here.
Yeah. Important to keep on that in focus.
Does
That's what he
DPS have to protect students, teachers, staff from students who might pose a physical danger to them?
We have a duty to make sure that those students are on safety plans if the information around them is credible. We have a duty to ensure that our schools are safe, and that's why those who are brought in on safety plans, it's not just like two adults get into a room and we just say, all right, safety plan done. The administration knows. The full administration would know about a safety plan. The campus safety officers would know about a safety plan. If there was an SRO, now the SRO would know about the safety plan. So there's multiple folks that would know, and then also those who are supporting that individual would know if there was a safety plan. And so our duty is pretty wide, and we're making sure that we are getting everybody to there that needs to know. But the notion that we need to let parents know or let all teachers know, I don't think I'm there yet, and I would like to make sure that we are in compliance and not stepping out of federal law around student privacy with disclosing said information, just to make folks feel safer. But again, it could potentially cause unintentional targets for some of those students that have those plans.
We need to know.
And some of them aren't, as violent as.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You refocused? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's a good thing. These whites are kind of thinking in terms of like a sex offender list, and that any teen that was like caught with a gun before,
Right.
or was involved in some crime, something small maybe, but whatever, and went through family court or something like that. That like every parent should get a list of all the students, like a sex offender list. That way we can look out for them. They're the threats. And he explains, I think, in an earlier answer, like, so this is the second time the anchor asked him this. It's like, I don't think you answered this. He did, but he included more of his concerns that like this would lead to actual more discrimination and students getting harassed based on kitchen table discussions of like, oh, well, I heard this kid is like this, and then he did that, and and then you basically, they're gonna get bullied for something mistake they did because they fucked up somewhere. Or he got into a fight. Oh, you got into a fight? Oh, maybe you'll fight me. Oh, let's get into it. Because that's the shit I saw in high school. And interestingly enough, maybe it's just how my whiteness, but when there is some knife attack or big fight or gang stuff in my high school, an urban high school, majority black, it didn't touch me at all. I never felt unsafe.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe because guns were never involved, and it was never a sense that like no one's going to spray the school. There's just no threat of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it never happened before, and even with gang stuff and because it was always just, I think people like maybe there was we didn't have metal detectors or anything like that, or well, there were packs getting searched if you came in at 9, but if you came in any other time coming in, you wouldn't get searched. Or maybe I was completely not ignoring it, but I took steps to avoid the security culture at my high school. So I guess there was a security culture of sorts. So any fights and whatever were small knives and fist fights. So, and then those were always like, people with beefs,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
personal
they didn't
drama.
have
Yeah,
beefs with me, and they didn't. I had beefs with them, so
right.
it
So
wasn't going to
you would never
touch
be
me.
a target.
It was never,
Hmm.
yeah, it wasn't going to touch me. Not in school or after school. No matter
Yeah.
how nerdy and wide I was, that was something that was a threat in middle school, and it was a threat then because I did get my ass kicked up um, once. But I was in the building, and it was no weapons involved. You know, it was just, and it was someone who wasn't supposed to be in the building. So, okay. But that was actually a formative experience. Instead of making me more racist or whatever, it made me less racist. It made me just think about just how shitty the situation of some of the, these other
Absolutely.
kids were. It's
Yeah,
like, man,
yeah.
he's
Like
so
how they got
fucking
into a
mad.
position
I
where.
did not do anything except be in that room and be white and nerdy, and
Hmm.
that made him angry enough to kick the shit out of me. What the fuck is going on here? It's
Yeah.
obviously not
Yeah.
him.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't blame it.
Larger
I
context.
can't put it on because that's not an explanation. That didn't
Right.
make sense. So I had to make sense of it in other ways
Very good. Awesome.
through the lens of
as
empathy.
attempted murder. Again, we're talking about students get put on safety plans for a magnitude of reasons in different public schools.
What role, if any, should principals play in determining whether a student can safely attend their school?
Well, in many cases, if a student were to administrative transfer into a school, that would have to be approved by the school leader. The only time that a school leader would be absolved from, making the placement decision of any student is really through the our neighborhood schools process. So if you live in the boundary, you then have a guaranteed seat at that school unless you choice out into another school. But if it's administrative transfer, if a principal, one principal and another principal, and a student wants to go to another school, the principals both have to sign off on transferring that student. So it's a case-by-case basis when it comes to the knowledge of a principal accepting a student, especially mid-year. It's actually really hard to leave a school and go to another school unless you've physically moved addresses mid-year, because in most circumstances you have to, in most if not all circumstances, you have to be able to have that administrative transfer throughout the school year.
I understand the transfer process, but I'm just talking about any student who's attended a school for any period of time. Principal says, because of X happening, we can't safely have that student around other students and staff. What role should that principal have to play in that process?
I think that they should communicate with the district their concerns and making sure that we're in compliance with the law and seeing where there are alternative opportunities for us to think of. If it's not this school, then where? I think that we also have to make sure that that student has a guaranteed seat somewhere in the Denver Public Schools. But we can't get into the practice of just pushing away students just because of them having a bad day or making a mistake or being involved in something. We have to look at every case individually, because they may have done something 3 years ago on a Saturday that may not reflect who they are today, but that's still on their record and still able to be seen. And so somebody may make a judgment of saying, well, that incident happened and I don't want it to happen again, but that student could be a totally new, different person. Their records in Denver Public Schools follow them from K through 12. So folks can look at the records of a student all the way up to 12th grade. And I wouldn't want somebody to, get to potentially grade 10 and say you made a mistake in 6th grade, and now I'm going to judge you off that decision you made in 6th grade, because I don't want you coming to this new environment in grade 10 to potentially make that same mistake.
Yeah, man, this interviewer just keeps trying to essentialize these students for certain behaviors that they may have had.
Well, the questions are
A
going to
long
be
time ago.
essentialized. I think when it comes to mass media, the questions will always be essentialized. The conversations will be essentialized. That's what the big complaint about mass media conversation is,
Yeah.
or the public forum. It's always going to essentialize, because when you're talking about social solutions to anything, there's a lot of moving parts. And this guy, his answers are 3 minutes because there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved. They're social. They're about connections between circles and circles. And when it comes to, the black and white mindsets of white people, it's like, well, what's the answer? One thing for one answer.
Right.
Cops,
Give us your bumper
violence,
sticker answer to complex social problems.
Keep the bad things away. Purity testing. They're the real purity testers in this case. And yeah, keep the bad things away from me or my child, blah, blah. And that's what makes things go around. But then, in saying, if they're not safe at this school, where would they be safe to go to? No school at all, then they're basically expelled by rote. And then you're basically saying you're assigning them to being underclass. You're basically
Yeah,
saying
well-
they're underclass or untouchable. Land of opportunity, my fucking ass.
Yeah.
Land of second chances and whatever. Well, they had 2 chances or they had 3.
Well, I mean, not only that, but
they're
you're
fucking
practically
15.
kicking the can down the road that will guarantee that
That
someone
yeah,
else
they're
takes
going
the
to prison.
violence
The ultimate
yeah, right.
solution is prison or death
Right.
sentence, and that's
Yeah.
what some of these white people think about.
It's just
Even progressives, yeah, actually, we'll talk about. Well, the worst of the worst should still get the death penalty. Some of it's part of their religion or something else like that.
yeah, for
But
sure.
the 2 things that kind of got me into talking about restorative justice today was that yesterday I just did a training to represent union members in disciplinary interrogations and what have you, and interviews.
Cool.
And one of the things mentioned was how one of the things you do in the checklist, because you do deal with like one of these a week, so you're not going to be a full investigator. You can't really act as a full defense lawyer, kind of thing. It's not really that level anyway. And there's a lot of rules about how like you really can't talk that much when you're in the interrogation, but you can use some hand signals to make sure like you can stop the member from talking too much, or you can call for a caucus if there's a good reason,
Sure.
or a reason like they're getting upset and they need to be consulted on something. But anyway, so you're not really representing them, but you're mostly there for moral support, we say, because it is completely punitive. Civil service, anywhere, even if you have a unionized workplace where you actually aren't, you do get defense in a way, but it's still a defense inside a top-down punitive justice system, because the management only knows one way to deal with things: punishments. But they will lower their punishments if it looks like you're sorry or you're doing something to atone. So there is kind of restorative in there, but it's not actually worked in as part of the structure. It's kind of incumbent on there being a union and a union person being there to kind of talk to the member and saying like, look, if you keep coming in late, let's work out a restorative, thing that you could do, or it's up to the union person to ask what's going on at home. Let's find some context. Let's find the source of this problem. It's
Right.
not just that the management are assholes, that you're not coming when you say you're supposed to come in.
Right.
Or you are sleeping, sleeping on the job in a really verbose way with the shoes on the table and everything. We get it all. But one of the things mentioned was you go to the HR, you get their file, and you actually take out any negative comments that are over 2 years old. They should not have anything in their record that's negative, because in the 2 years, like basically that's the kind of window of like, if it's older than 2 years, they're not the same person. This shouldn't
Right,
count
right,
against
right.
them. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that he mentioned a case of like, let's say they did something 2 years ago, and that shouldn't count against them now, because when they're a teenager, there's even more change year to year.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, some people are really immature, and because you think, oh, once people are past the age of 18 or 24, suddenly it's like magic. They go from an immature person to a mature person, and they're supposed to act completely sensible in all situations. No, if they were fucked up as a kid, they're going to be fucked up as an adult. And more punishment only makes them more fucked up.
Absolutely. More resentful,
More resentful, more alienated, more
willing
like
to say,
just
just
hate
fuck it,
people and authority and everything's stupid and against me. I'm
Right,
not the
right.
problem, because that's the only.
Yeah, they've been coming after me my whole life, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, why should I change myself in any way? Or take accountability for even the good things, or particularly bad things. So it was an interesting class, but it really just struck home just how restorative justice is needed everywhere, and the fact that even when you have unionized workplaces, especially the business unions, the best they can do is kind of just actually there are defense lawyers of a type, that there is a defense in these situations, because otherwise the management has all the cards. They're doing the surveillance, they have the proof that they did something wrong. It's more about owning up to it and getting a lighter punishment than being proved innocent. but because otherwise it's like you can have a mindset of no one talks, everyone walks. But if you just keep saying I don't know in the interrogation, that's more suspicious, especially when you need to kind of assume that the management has a picture of you sleeping, or they have proof that you stole something,
Right.
or someone,
Yeah.
or in the case of someone in the museum, he was masturbating.
Oh, fun. That's a fun one to be a
To
party
porn,
to.
to porn, even not just like
To
in the
porn,
bathroom,
not just. Oh man, wow.
on his computer, I think.
Oh,
So he works with kids, and so that's where like the union president's still a little kind of a conservative woman, black woman, kind of framing things as like, you can't work with children. Like, well, was he? Because my stupid question was like, well, it wasn't child porn he was caught with, right?
yeah.
I don't care if it's like, I guess it's still a sex offense, but it doesn't mean he's like a danger to the kids. But
Yeah, there's a big difference.
he doesn't have the
between those two
self-control
things.
that
Yeah.
he shouldn't be, he's not obviously unprofessional.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just not going to be outraged and hair on fire about it.
Okay. Well, should we finish this up, or is there more that you wanted us to see of this one?
You can just hear him say, our main priority is that everyone has a right to education.
Okay.
And that's something
Wanna ask you-
that comes forward in other conversations like the New York Board of Regents, where New York has been, and this is all urban school districts, they're doing less suspensions, less expulsions, and less in-school suspensions. And I mentioned this in my other meeting I went to that was kind of updating me on restorative justice in my county, on the county level. One superintendent asked, after a presentation about the racial aspects of suspension and in-school suspension, that it was, all minority students. And he's just like, well, I've always been kind of about having a softer or more productive in-school suspension. That way they're not losing out on class time, that they're actually doing something with that time separated. And not only the expert who's, the woke, data supported expert slaps back on that, but even other members in the Board of Regents, because they're all retired or ex superintendents. They would say, like, if our priority is what's good for the students and not what's convenient for the teachers or the administrators, then we should end school suspensions, in school, out school, whatever, because they're not what's good for the
Definitely
student.
out of school.
There's no positive benefit, period. It is only what is easy. And this guy, kudos, kind of says something to that effect, that the safety plans are not easy, but they are what we are doing to ensure like justice and rights. So that's pretty cool on him.
Yeah, nice.
And the fact that they did phase out the SROs, we haven't done that yet in Albany, but we are doing restorative justice stuff in our school district too. And they're also cutting down on the number of suspensions and such.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Do you want to move on to the next video then, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've talked for him in a way.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice background picture. What is
I just typed in restorative justice. This is one of the images
okay.
that came up. So
Gotcha.
yeah, personal growth in a circle of people. It looks like.
Yeah. So this is still segueing. This is restorative justice with students. So we're in like, this is what the school system should be doing, and many are doing as an alternative, because nothing else has worked, and parents, teachers, students are sick of the status punitive, prison, school to prison pipeline status quo, and that's slowly filtering up the levels in the education policy sector. It is not filtered into other sectors of governance and whatever, but it slowly will, because when it comes to gun violence and guns on the streets and all that stuff, Chicago, mass, the Democratic politicians, the judges, they just don't know what to do. They're completely ignorant and uncreative. And they're just, because they're all soaked up in their own work. So, there's that, but you're so wrapped up in what you're currently doing that you need to be told you need to be offered the alternative. And so when we're being protesting and being active, there's always that state in my mind of being nice and cooperative to offer, the alternative. Now, of course, once that alternative is, say, rejected from bigotry and conservatism and whatever, that's where you get mad and direct actiony, and whatever. But first, you gotta just start from a good positive place of people are just being uncreative, but they do want something better. And maybe that's just more of a mass public thing and not who's currently profiting. Anyone who's actually profiting from the status quo are comfortable. But
Yeah.
on the teacher and principal level, they're not comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Did you want to start with the Everything You Need to Know video?
No.
Or
The
restorative
circles. The restorative
Okay.
circles. That's the students.
Cool. Awesome.
We're getting more less fine grain as we go, but I think that's what works about what I set up here.
Nice.
First, I'm going to read a quote. To succeed, you must first improve. To improve, you must first practice. Young people have to be given space to grow and to feel like, okay, I made a mistake, but from this learning experience, I can continue to become better. To learn, you must first fail.
When you're talking about student discipline, a lot of times we are punitive because it's faster, and restorative takes more time. But restorative practices are better long-term. So at Procone, we have a place called The Zone, which we use in lieu of suspension.
Welcome to The Zone.
It's a collaborative space where kids get into a circle and they discuss what their behaviors were and ways to correct it.
We have The Zone every morning from 7 to 9 a.m. Today, we had 8 students in The Zone. We're here today to talk about how to make things right when we make mistakes, poor choices.
That's a tight.
Usually the infractions are cell phone use, disrespect, cursing, but it could also be that there was an argument in a classroom or more aggressive behaviors that also get sent to us. So even though you had a conflict that brought you here, if we can bring our best selves to this circle, we can get a lot done, we can learn from each other. When students come in, we go over circle guidelines so that there are agreements that we hold within this space. What does it mean to listen from the heart?
You're trying to feel like you're relating to the situation.
Just like showing respect to them.
Once we teach them really what...
What's that?
No. They highlighted safe space. Guidelines
Safe
create
space.
safe
Oh,
space
no.
for students.
Oh, man. The wokes have taken over.
Safe space
School
instead
discipline.
of in-school. This is taking the place of in-school suspension. So,
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting, even the soft, approach. It's still not good because they don't want to take them out of class. We don't. But to replace in-school suspension, okay, well, obviously you acted up in class. You need a different kind of learning, and this, we're gonna do, emotional skills and stuff. The stuff that your parents obviously couldn't give you for many reasons. So, so we're gonna do that instead of in school suspension. But they make it clear that this is before school hours, so it's not replacing. We're not taking you out of class, but you're gonna get assigned to this the next day, I guess.
Cool.
Which is, I guess, makes it a form of detention. But imagine detention. But again, detention's a punishment. It's imprisonment. Right. This is extra time, but it's community service. But you're doing it you're serving yourself. You're only helping yourself doing this.
Yeah. It's priming you for the day to come to have a better result in that day.
And how this is not a space where there's a power dynamic between you and another person. Then they kind of disarm and we get to what's causing that behavior.
I had somebody come to me and tell me that a friend said something bad about me. Most of the time when you're in trouble, you get a referral and you have a consequence. They don't really want to hear your side of the story.
When you come into
Zone, they have a conversation with you and they kind of tell you how to solve your problem the positive way. I was able to go to her and like work it out.
We're really just trying to get context. Whenever there's a conflict, right, both parties contribute to the conflict.
Both sides of a conflict.
Right. Although you may not feel like you contributed to the problem, you played a piece in it. And that's a part of the social emotional learning that we're trying to get them to see. We really want to have a discussion about the things you can control.
I just need to catch myself and know my surroundings.
It is a place for students to process their role in it, understanding who is harmed, but then also understanding that it's okay to reflect on what you as a student needed in that situation.
I don't need anything from others to make it right, because I can be mature on my own.
But how can we help you in the maturing process? Because we're going to be here too. What I usually say is I don't want to change your behavior. I want you to think about it before you do it. Really, I've seen them becoming very intentional about what they do, what they say.
Consciousness before maturity. You know, to know what you're doing, and even that awareness itself leads to maturity. It's not instilled trained values like a dog.
Right.
It's actually thinking more. And the thing about punishments and authoritarian methods, it's all about actually thinking less, taking the thinking out of it.
Yep.
We want people to think less. We want a solution that doesn't require me to think.
Expedient responses.
Because I think enough at work or whatever the hell white people talk about. Like, why don't you want to think more about this? What's the what is challenging about this? Do they want to? Do they have to admit they're stupid and ignorant themselves, and that's the fear they have, and the stiff way of like, you know, it's all about being afraid.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I deal with this all the time at the school that I work for, because we specialize in autistic learners, and a lot of times they have one of their main issues that they're trying to deal with is just impulse control. So you make a lot more headway saying, hey, just think for a second before you do what you're going to do. And yeah, it's not just do what I say, listen to my voice, obey my authority, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there was this when I was subbing, I was subbed with because it was one of the few classes that were still in, you know, going to the building during COVID, were the most disabled. And there was this one girl, like she was 16, but like she still had the mind of like a toddler or 5-year-old as far as emotional and like intellectual development, let's say. But like she would spend phys ed just like sitting down and bouncing a ball like up and down, chanting a pop song, like da 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 da, you know, like that. She would say the words, just repeat that over and over again for like 20 minutes, because you know that repetition kind of like
there was a stim for her.
The stem, the rhythm of like if you interrupted any of her rhythms and coloring or whatever, screaming would follow.
Sure.
Yeah. It was interesting. I worked with the one kid over and over again. He was in my bicycle. I mean, he has, you know, the standard autistic stuff of like being super focused on a particular thing.
Sure.
And like we were supposed to do 5 things over the course of the hour or the day, and he just like would not want to switch, you know.
No, it's just that one thing.
Because, you know.
Yeah, they can be very rigid in their routine and wanting to do what they want to do right now. Yep. All right, moving on.
Has to own up to their consequences.
And that's the whole purpose of the zone.
By me owning it, it's gonna help me better.
Saying how the zone could be like these terms are pretty much taken out of the pseudo science and the woo woo of new age and corporate corporate yuppiedom. The zone in the 90s, the zone was a joke about like created by, you know, some self-help guru. The zone, and now the zone is being used as a form of restorative justice for for any restorative justice could be called, like we're entering any safe space can just be called the zone, the actual place of self-improvement and in community, the thing that was actually like missing from self-improvement in the previous decades.
For sure.
Yeah. So before
That's
going
cool,
on
though.
with more stories, there's the last video, which is just the general outline of restorative justice, but it includes a little bit of pseudo-Marxism in there, or at least the
Goodness.
Marxist interpretation can be overlaid, which is what
Oh
I'm
my
gonna do.
goodness.
So it's from the UK, but their justice system isn't too different from ours.
All right. Well, let's take a look.
A victim and an offender come together in space and time.
Ooh, hold on.
The offender causes harm to the
Let me just take off the.
victim, perhaps by physical assault or stealing property from the victim. The harm can include mental or physical abuse and can occur in the absence of the victim. And other parties could be affected by the harm caused: family, friends, colleagues. As a consequence of the offender's actions, a conflict and harm has occurred between the victim and the offender. If or when the offender is identified and the police arrest them for the crime, the mechanisms of the criminal justice system comes into play. The purpose of the justice system is to bring about justice. It's not about reconciling the conflict or addressing the harm that exists between the victim and the offender. In fact, if we look at the way the justice system works, it becomes apparent that the parties actually involved in the conflict or harm, the victim and the offender, become increasingly separated. Police investigate the crime and collect the evidence. Police custody officers ensure the safety of the offender whilst in custody. Victim services help the victim with emotional and practical support. The Crown Prosecution Service ensures that there is sufficient evidence to prosecute the offender. The defence solicitor represents the offender and advises whether to plead guilty or not guilty. Witness services look after the needs of the witnesses, including the victim, if they are required in court. If the offender pleads guilty, the victim will not be asked to attend court. Legal clerks ensure the court process
Let's see
works.
the pattern here.
The jury determines the innocence or guilt of the offender. The judge oversees the trial and decides on the sentence for the offender. Probation services manage the offender during and after they have served their sentence. Prisons incarcerate the offender for the length of any custodial sentence.
Pause it.
So,
That's a lot of alienation.
That's true. That is absolutely true.
And the victim's all the way back there.
Yep.
All the way back there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to call the mindset, but there's this like, oh, we want offended parties to be separated. You know, that's how we solve these issues, by just separating them. You know, we separate race issues solved by separation, gender issues, separation. So if there's this muddlement of who's one gender or another, obviously we can't separate effectively. That's what the real fear is.
Yeah.
When it comes to the challenge of transness or non-binariness, especially.
Right.
That we can't properly separate people because apparently all justice and safety is predicated on separation.
Separation.
It's not framed that way, but I think it needs to be forced. That explanation of why do you think separation is necessarily good, just, or like the way things should be?
Yeah.
How does separation better than actually resolving conflict?
Right.
Because whether it's, sexual harassment on trains, oh, we need a woman's only car. We need a woman's only bathroom. We need a whites only neighborhood.
Yeah.
And a black only neighborhood. Well, we don't call them black only neighborhoods, but we have white only neighborhoods or rich only neighborhoods. Or then class, we separate class based on paying a toll and having barriers and so on. Not having the bus being able to go to certain places. I don't want a bus stop around me and then poor people will be able to go to my neighborhood and rob me. We need to be separate. That's why I drive 2 hours to work. So because I'm separate from all those other bad people.
Everyone else. Yeah.
All those other people. So it needs to be asked why. And then, of course, people are dumb, stupid. There's threats to me. We're in competition. All the things that capitalism is the overall cause for. And if not capitalism, but, hierarchical relationships. So we can, because otherwise feudalism and other such hierarchy. That's where real anarchism kind of comes in.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's just that conservative mentality that things were always thus, and most problems are just intractable. So the best we can do is just hope to keep the conflictual parties apart from each other. This is what Jordan Peterson always comes down to when pressed for solutions about everything. He's like, "Well, I don't know what you do about it. There's just no solution to it." So you don't do
separate.
anything really. You separate, yeah.
It's a lack of imagination, and it's odd. It's what we're doing. What I'm doing is a high level conversation that when I ever try to imagine myself doing it in public, even as a public comment, it just seems so separated from the actual way things are, that it's ethereal, that it's ethereal, it's a kind of abstractness that I want to avoid. And it's like, how do I, because we are outside of the Overton window when we talk like this. How, and
Right.
of course we can have some answers. We can, if we can push on the Overton window towards our side by continuously saying we need to do the opposite of separation. We only resolve problems by talking them out, just as the frickin' teenager said. It's like I had the tools, and then I could work it out with her instead of socking her in the face. Because I heard she said I was fat, or I was,
Whatever it was,
she
yeah.
was spreading rumors about me that I'm a slut, whatever it is, whatever. Cartoons are dealing with this sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, and the fact that the left actually has answers and solutions for these problems is really one of the main things that finally enticed me over to its side. Because liberals, they will claim to have solutions, but it's always just like, oh, more education, just more opportunity for everyone to go to college. Well, I mean that only gets you so far when you have
We don't
a
need a jobs
inherently hierarchical
program. We need a
situation.
jobs training program.
Yeah, jobs training.
Whether or
Yeah,
not
the welfare to
market is
work and
providing jobs,
yeah,
or what have you. We at least want people to be prepared to join the
right.
capitalist workforce. But capitalism is just water, so it's realism.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It also should be realism to point out that training people for jobs is not enough, and it's not adequate, and it's not working.
Yeah, well, it never could be.
Unless you can point to, they can never point to statistics. They can only point to success cases, which
absolutely
certainly is what you use to push mainstream people in the Overton window towards to push our boundary of the Overton window is kind of with success cases. So not with stats, because people don't care about the facts.
Well,
what feels
it's too
good
abstract.
is when there's a kid that you kept out of prison, and now he's a small business owner. Because those are the success stories from the DA's office when it comes to restorative justice. Is like 5 years later, he's now the head of HR for this nonprofit that we sent him to volunteer for originally. That success, or the guy who owns 3 businesses, whether or not they suck, or they're just a juice business, whatever. But I don't care about his businesses. They're not like but because at the end of the conversation I was having with like the coordinator of the community justice programs for their district attorney, he was kind of like pointing out the contradiction and the absurdity of not only before COVID, the bowling alleys close, all of the YMCA's move out of town. We don't have a YMCA in Albany anymore. And then all the parents and adults are like, well, what's wrong with the kids? Why do they feel like they have to go around with guns? Because everything closed. And he framed it, and this is what I push back on. He framed it as a failure of the community. And I pointed out, well, what do you want the community to do?
Right.
You just mentioned these are, and I say more or less, trying to get it in a way that he can understand or that it clicks with him. I say, like, these are private entities, the private businesses.
It's not community
you want
control.
The community, is the community meant to bail out, these businesses? Why
Yeah.
couldn't they stay open? What was the lack of community support here? He kind of put it down to like something should have been done, or there's maybe this framing from movies that the community can come together and save the day. And this didn't happen, and it keeps not happening. And the conclusion is, oh, the people don't care. We don't have a community, or the community is disjointed. There's something wrong with it. I'm like, well, I see poverty, and a poor community is not going to save the bowling alley, because the
Yeah.
bowling alley closed and
Why
was
should they?
turned, and the city was all for its redevelopment into yuppie apartments.
Right.
Because that's what happened to the bowling alley in Albany. We had two, technically maybe just one. We had one that was slowly like a little outside of town, but that's closed too. So it's just the fact that like with COVID especially, but even before then, they were not very profitable.
Yeah.
The closest thing to a community like program, place where kids can go that isn't a public program is the boxing ring. Basically fighting. You're still fighting, but at least
Yeah.
it's controlled,
A little more
and
controlled.
moderated fighting.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm fine with that. Like I suggested, like if the kids are fighting so much, then we need to have martial arts programming so they can, do physical stuff outside after class, and that's
Work
what
that
sports are
aggression out,
for. More sports, but different kinds of sports. Or if it's gaming, then there needs to be a gaming room so that kids can go to and game for 2 hours before they go to home.
Sure.
And then kick them out at 6.
Sure. Yeah, but why would a
But
community
don't kick them out
ever
at 4.
why would a community ever have an interest in saving a private business? Like where the business's profits going to the community? Like no. So why should it only be, privatized profits but socialized,
You say that, Zach, but
rescued?
the neoliberal conception of community includes private businesses. You have
It's
black
absolutely ridiculous.
communities. I know it is ridiculous. I'm not arguing against it, but
Yeah, no, I get
I'm
you.
like, there's a wall to break around this. Okay, so we have a regional black chamber of commerce that they actually just bought this old social club building that's around the block from me. And it was probably, I don't know if it was like the old white man's clubs of old. I mean, it's a very old building, but now it's owned by the Black Chamber of Commerce. They have a big sign on the corner of it. It's an old neoclassical building, and they're like billing themselves, and they promote themselves on social media, like oh yeah. And one of the council members, who's a lawyer, I find her to be boring as shit. Nothing, like she doesn't. I don't know what her value is. She's every interaction with her just makes me like want to sleep. But like there's nothing there. But like she was wearing colorful clothes, and she's like, this is our woman. She's like representing us, and she's like this and that, and Black Wall Street. They keep using the phrase Black Wall Street. Their dream is to have a Black Wall Street. All of these businesses, because that's wealth, and that's apparently good for the black community, and really it's just good for some blacks.
The lucky few.
Otherwise, there is no black community. Though their version of community is them making money and then them donating some of it to community programs of some type, which they will get protective about, because I talked to a guy who's a producer on a radio station, and he's the freelancer who, when someone wants to do some community program or event, they go to him because he's a free agent. He's not tied to anyone else because everyone's siloed and they don't like working together. And it's hard to get into why, but it's a mix of cliquishness, territories related to funding, competing over it. And that's probably the heart of it, is that Hunger Games on the citywide level when it comes to grants. Recently, the COVID relief funds, you had to propose, that you deserve to get some of it. And not everyone could get it. The city had to there was a board proposed, and they had to make a snap decision on who deserves it, who's getting the COVID relief funds and who isn't, based on, a list of parameters based on what was lost during COVID, jobs, social services, city, and any public
shoot. Oh no. Dan signal dropped there. That was not expected. Let's see if we can. Oh, it's popping back
Am I
up.
back now? I'm hearing
Yeah, I
you
think
again.
you're back now. Okay.
Okay. I'm hearing you now. So let's finish this. Sorry. So I stopped this there because this is a great image. I love this way of explaining just how
Yeah.
alienating
That really
the criminal
lays it
justice
out
system
there.
is, how the injustice and just like how the process at every
Process
step
just
is alienating
separation.
for
Yeah,
both
yeah.
offender and victim.
Right.
So the victim is just always on the outside because basically, and this is something that the restorative justice it helps everybody. It helps the victim. They feel empowered. It empowers the offender. They feel like they actually could have get some control in their life because obviously they fucked up because they didn't have any fucking control of their emotions or what they're thinking about or how they go about things. They're trapped, whatever. And so is the victim. They're trapped too.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Continuing on.
Justice is seen to be done, but the original conflict and harm is still there. The only people who can resolve this conflict are the victim and the offender, the person who was harmed and the person who caused the harm. With the restorative justice approach, the focus is on bringing the victim and the offender together. This provides them with the opportunity to communicate with each other directly or indirectly, often for the first time since the original conflict or harm. This might be by an exchange of letters, or it might be in a face-to-face meeting. Of course, both must agree to the meeting, which will only occur following careful preparation and the risk assessments by a trained restorative justice practitioner. The meeting, facilitated by the practitioner,
Now, early
follows
on,
a structured...
you'll have victims who don't want to meet. What maybe a bias, maybe their own like old thinking. This is totally new and foreign concept of actually like meeting a person who stole from you. You just want to beat them up. You want them to see them punished. But sometimes it's you just don't like you feel like this is for their benefit or something like that. That was an early concern or something that was happening with our community, our restorative justice practice on the felony level, but that seemed to I learned that it changed. It did a 180 change where victims will now participate freely, usually through writing a statement to be read to the offender.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Alone, this was the anecdote given where you have a teen and he's a big thing in our area is theft out of cars because it's just such a soft target. Many cars are unlocked, and even if they're not locked, there's stuff in there. You break
Easily
the window.
accessed. Yeah.
It's not a lot of risk, and you're only hurting some property anyway. But you have teens stealing stuff out of cars, and but the statement was read by one victim that's like, it was just a wallet to you, but it had my special IDs that I had to go back down to New York City to get a replacement. I had to take 2 days off of work. This was a big fucking deal to me. It wasn't just the cash you took, it wasn't just that. So, and this made the teen, as the anecdote goes, sink down, like embarrassment, just like feeling guilty about it, feeling bad. And that's worth more than some prosecutor saying you done fucked up or.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
some high moral authority just
saying,
talking down to you. Yeah.
Taking some moral high ground.
Yeah.
Because it's just so inhumane in that way. Like when it was Community Accountability Board that I volunteered on, the first program, the first step was just misdemeanors that are more consensual crimes. The victim was the community, the city of Albany. So any resident in the city of Albany could be a volunteer for this and be representing the community and assigning the next steps, which basically hearing out the offender, because there is no victim. We are the victim because it's a consensual crime, more or less. So it's like some of the times we didn't feel like they did anything wrong, or what was done wrong was a big impact, shoplifting from Walmart, for example.
Yeah, not a big deal.
In this case, the offender's Walmart, the victim's Walmart, but fuck them. But in their sense, the victim is like their parents, because they were more afraid of their parents finding out. This is a college student who basically shoplifted on a dare.
Sure.
And but another time it was a shoplifter, but it was like a mother shoplifting from CVS, and she was just kind of shoplifting stuff for her. But then her story was, she has 2 kids and she could only afford to give one a birthday, and she
Aw.
basically stole so she could afford to give the other one a birthday. Because maybe like what you had to buy for the birthday, dinner out maybe, would require
Yeah.
her to have more cash.
Sure.
And so she stole like makeup and stuff.
Hmm.
And that's and that was more like writing a letter to the CVS manager in that case. We did not ask the college student to write a letter to Walmart though, because the CVS has actually been closed now. But it was closed by the big corporation, not
Yeah.
CVS. By the way, is a Northeast pharmacy.
Oh, we have it here
brand.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The Walgreens and Dwayne Reed are their competitors.
Sure. Sure.
And with they say over COVID, safety concerns that they're closing like half of their stores. Never mind the fact that every pharmacy location is swamped with people who need meds, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's like it is worth having one in every neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they're going to take the pharmacy that's a neighborhood away that's already like overburdened from what I could see, and they're going to take the hundreds of people from the hood pharmacy. Anyway, and the one that was shoplifted, I assume, is the one that has closed. Years apart, of course, it's not bearing on it, but it is somewhat an abstract community disservice to shoplift from that CVS. Go to suburb CVS.
There you go.
But in that case, then you'd be dealing with. Well, no, it's within the Albany County, but it's more within the city of Albany, actually.
Sure.
So if it was colony or suburb police picking them up, it would have been worse. But anyway, yeah. So let's keep going.
Yep. Continuing on.
We're running out of time.
Approach and takes place in a neutral and safe environment. Both are given the opportunity to have their say. The victim might ask, "Why did you choose me? Have you been following me? What's happened to my iPad? Do you know how this has affected my children?" And they might say, "I want to see you change. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. I haven't slept properly since. I've had to move house." And the offender? The offender has the opportunity to answer the questions being asked of them, and perhaps to explain their behaviour to the victim, and, for probably the first time, they see and hear the real impact of their actions on another human being. At the end of a restorative justice meeting, the victim and offender decide together how the offender can repair the harm that they've caused, and perhaps how the offender can take steps to change or stop their offending behaviour in future. This may be by providing answers, an apology, a promise to change their behaviour, or not to approach the victim in future. It can also be a reparative activity. The parties then go their separate ways, but the victim has been given a voice, answers to their questions, and the opportunity to move on, which helps them to cope and recover from the crime. And the offender is presented with an opportunity to take responsibility for the harm that they've caused, display remorse, and be motivated to change their lives.
Cool.
So the main mechanism there to explain to others how this works, and that it's not just rewarding or giving people something, is it's basically creating the space to think more.
Yeah.
To ask the questions and to get people thinking. Usually the offender, of course, because other success stories, especially, so the main shift of the restorative justice in Albany County has been more towards the under 24, 18 to 24. It was 16 to 24, but then we have raised the age. Kudos. But so now all of that's handled in family court, but 18 to 24, it's more about diverting those aged away from prison. So what I didn't know was that there has been movement and success in the felony boards that they've set up, so that they can bring in the kids who are not kids, but let's say young adults who are committing felonies or being charged with felonies. And so there's more. Our defense lawyer is involved now because it's not just a misdemeanor. It is more intensive. There's facilitators, the board of facilitators. They encourage that half of them are also just ex-prisoners themselves. So it's not the same tone as scaring them straight, but they can say like, you're going to end up in prison if this keeps happening, you know. But
Yeah.
it's also more about just asking them, what do you want to do with your life? Because really, you think schools would ask this question, but if they're too busy
It could be
doing
the
the
first time
easy
ever.
thing and suspending them, they're not asking them, what do you want to do with your life? They've never, you know, some of these offenders, they've never been asked
Never been asked.
that
Yeah.
question. Or they have, or like, you know, well, I wanted to drive a truck, you know, to be a truck driver. But this is the anecdote given. But I, you know, failed one portion of the test. So it's like, well, that's an easy fix. Let's get you studying for the test, you know, finish this coursework, retake the test. This is part of the punishment, but really it's the requirements of the program. And that's why they call them, those that have completed it, they're graduates. They call them graduates. Anyone who's completed the program and gone through it, done the outtake interview, they're graduates. So it's like an educational experience, not a justice process that's like, you know, was it alienating? Use that term again. So
Yeah, definitely.
a lot of anecdotes like that. He went through them all, and I'm gonna have him on my show, so I'll have an audio
Cool.
version of that because it's basically my qualm with the whole thing is just how covert it all is. He complains that they don't have the staff to do proper outreach. That you have the lawyers who don't know about what they're doing, the judges don't know about what they're doing. They should be getting way more cases. That includes the misdemeanors. So maybe like more that the cab will be brought back. But he mentioned the reason why the cab boards, because I stopped doing it because we were just getting too few cases. We were being called like months at a time, and even then maybe it wouldn't be it would be a no show. But we were just getting fewer cases, and this is before 2020 or maybe even 2016. I forget when I really stopped doing it. I did record it somewhere, but maybe it was like 2018. But he mentions that the cops are just not arresting people for misdemeanors anymore. In the last 3 years, there's been a shift that the police actually need to show that they're fucking worth having around. So they have put more time into arresting people for felonies, whether it be holding a gun or violent crime, you know, to show that they're doing their jobs. They're doing what what people really want them to be doing. Not just arresting shoplifters or responding to every little thing, especially for the consensual crimes. But it's not out of mindset; it's out of necessity. But that's where the felony boards come in, and now they're ready to go forward with what is called gun diversion, which is any kid or teen or whatever caught with a gun. They're rather than being sentenced straight to 7 years prison because the judges and the DA acknowledge that this does not help at all, they'll be diverting them just based on the gun possession stuff. Because once guns are involved, it gets way hairier. You get way more pushback, I suppose. I don't know what the other felony charges are because I haven't been part of it, but I was invited that I could start the facilitator training and join that too. But it's not really on my agenda because of my other experiences and what and everything else I'm doing, which includes the union representation stuff.
Yeah. You got quite the full docket. Yeah.
Learning how to actually have a paper trail, pay bills, and keep receipts with everything. So that was the last restorative justice videos that I saved because I just did this in the last hour beforehand. Sure. But I do have other videos.
Good introduction.
So let me throw some. Let's do this one because this just needs something to fill the rest of our time. So this is also on the this is going back to the eco village commune subjects. It's from Vice, but it's something that I came across a long time ago, and so it's kind of what comes to mind when I think about eco villages.
Cool.
And then we can segue to how in solar punk groups and any other kind of utopian group, and this ties into utopianism, there's always this idea, and we've covered this a bit already, of picking a dying town where we organize, we have a foundation set up like a cooperative blank, and we're going to save the town. You know, we're going to make a deal with the town, and we're going to bring enough interested people in that will transform it, and we'll be able to build our new model society. I'm not optimistic about that stuff because it either doesn't happen, or when it does, it's like the places we've covered. They're very isolated. They are like either they are cults or they look like cults, kind of thing. Or other utopian communes, like in the 60s and 70s, they were a lot of cults.
Yeah, for sure.
And you also, you can going back to the 19th century, Shakers and other types of religious groups. They were building heaven on earth or being utopian, separate from the corrupted society of industrial capital. They were just trying to escape capitalism. They were not seeking to transform it, even though maybe there was a thought about we're transform the world with our example. But I think that example needs to be within the society. It cannot be separate.
I agree. Yeah, especially if you are trying to be that example, well, if people have to go, 4 hours out into the wilderness to see you up close, I mean, are they going to be able to stay overnight and see how things work for more than a day? Like just on a practical level, if you want this to be the shining example for everyone else to follow, it kind of has to be accessible to normies.
I also get that thought that hit me hard earlier on. I don't know when it was exactly, but I toured not an eco village, but it was like a permaculture lab, a farmstead sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was not far from Providence at all, but it was, in the suburb, I guess. And now it wasn't this example, but I guess maybe just watching videos like this, and I just think, or rather, I was invited to tours of these places or retreats, and but these are just breaks, and then you go back, and I'm looking at all these yuppies, and they just go back to their desk job, and they haven't changed a thing. They just have these dreams of maybe starting something, but in the end, they still have to pay rent, and not just rent to landlords, but just rents to the banks and live their lives, and they're not transforming society with it from these models. They're just little like the oases and havens. So we'll keep that in mind as we watch this particular.
This looks fun, even from the beginning.
Capital. Have you ever wanted to drop out of capitalism? So this is
every day. Yes, I have.
Yes. But can you really?
Of society
is actually to have fun. It's not really to struggle and suffer.
So this is a society in which leisure is prioritized.
Absolutely.
Supported by Geico.
We're here at Twin Oaks, which is one of the oldest intentional communities in the United States. Today, there are over 1,000 cooperative living situations registered across the country. Although, to avoid the term
probably seems like anything, though.
Yeah, like for the entire country.
There's 1,000 of them, but it still seems like nothing,
Yeah, especially if it's like 100, 200 people at most. That's, a couple thousand people.
Well, yeah, I think each one is no more than 20 to 30.
Well, then that's even less.
But yes, the fact that like the main site to go to for, newsletters and stuff is intentional community is the byline, not commune or eco-village even.
Sure.
I mean, my intentional communities usually are eco-villages, but they're intentional community. I mean, but can you not form an intentional community in an urban environment? It's like kind of saying you can't, or something like that. But I feel like, any cooperative housing is kind of an intentional community because they do look like eco-villages too, but maybe it's just one building, or it's a or it's a block or a row of houses. And maybe that's what we should be aiming for as a model within a city. But then, we need to think: are we still just oases or havens where our block is the socialist block, and we'll move, and then the police can surround us and bomb us? We need to kind of be integrated, and this is where the platformist 'IWW approach of just being completely decentralized and not really having any really condensed space, though we need spaces. And that's something that maybe too much platformism kind of gave up having a good space, or just having a one meeting space, or church, and but even that's
For sure.
Summer of Love associations, they prefer to be called intentional communities. Here in Louisa County, Virginia, thanks to lax zoning laws and low taxes, a weird little cluster of communes has sprung up in the heart of rural red state America. There are 7 within an hour of each other, each with their own philosophy and vibe. Apparently, the anarchists in Acorn throw the best parties. Twin Oaks was founded in 1967 by a group that included a tough-minded, decidedly unhippie-ish former secretary named Kat Kincaid. She and her co-founders were inspired by a science fiction novel called Walden 2. Written by the infamous psychologist B.F. Skinner, it described an egalitarian cooperative society. Most people found this novel extremely dull and dense, but Kincaid and her crew loved it. And when they found out no such society existed, they created their own.
We're going to meet with Keenan Dakota, who's lived here the longest of anyone currently at Twin Oaks.
We're hoping he can tell us a little bit more about how this community functions.
So everyone specialized their labor to what they want to do and what they're most suited to do?
Yeah, that's the best thing about our system. I like doing construction. I like fixing things, and so I get to do that.
Twin Oaks is an income-sharing community, which is kind of like 100% taxation. When you move in, you still keep all your assets and debt as your own. Then once you arrive, you work around 40 hours a week, both at Twin Oaks and sometimes neighboring communities. And in return, you get everything: food, housing, healthcare, even a small monthly allowance to spend on things like booze, smokes, and chocolate. But there's no boss telling people what to do and when to do it, which means certain tougher gigs can sometimes need extra incentives. For instance, they've recently appointed a tofu morale manager to boost the happiness of the residents who spend their days hauling bags of soybeans. Keenan is free to work however and whenever he pleases because the community actually makes good money. They generate $600,000 a year in profit from what have to be the most stereotypical commune businesses you could imagine: tofu and hammocks.
Where do you sell the tofu?
We sell the tofu to universities and to Whole Foods.
So to major buyers?
Yeah, apparently Whole Foods is going to start lowering their prices.
Are you worried about that?
Well, then we can't sell our tofu for as much.
So you're not immune to the shocks of the market?
Indeed not.
For over 30 years, residents at Twin Oaks produced every hammock sold in Pier 1 imports, Kirstie Alley's favorite purveyor of reasonably priced bedazzled pillows. And they no longer work with Pier 1. The demand was too great for their small labor force, but they still produce hammocks that go for upwards of $120 a pop.
This is the chair shop. This is where once we've milled the wood, we put it together and we sand it down.
Sure, a fair price for a
we
hammock.
inspect
I'm
it.
not sure.
And did you know?
That's kind of like
Yeah.
a high price, but maybe
I don't
this
know
is
if
an
that's a
old
going rate.
video. This is a decade old, so
Oh, okay.
so maybe it's actually
Maybe
kind of
with
expensive.
inflation, that's yeah.
Maybe
The
it's
price of a
200
hammock
now.
has gone up. Yep.
Maybe it's 200. I don't know.
Who knows?
Know how to do it.
But when I watched this as either as a college student or just post college in Occupy, I'm thinking like, yeah, you can do this stuff, but you're still not outside of capitalism, actually. So
Right.
and that's the message of this Vice video. So of course there's that.
Well, do they get into how profit is shared? Do they all decide where the profit goes, or what? What's the deal with that?
It's this 7-minute video doesn't, but it
Yeah.
does kind of say early on that's income sharing. So
Okay.
you're putting labor into the community businesses, and the community businesses get their profit gets reinvested into everything there.
Okay. So it is a socialist organization, but you are still swimming in the waters of capitalism.
Which
so.
is any co-op, of course.
Right.
So,
Right.
And that's co-op strategy in a nutshell, pros and cons. And I think even Richard Wolff will. I don't know. Does he have a? He doesn't. He has a caveat that the more cooperative is just these are models to push the Overton window towards socializing more things.
Right.
So we can't socialize more city land without there being co-ops to basically push for that, and but it doesn't help to know that many co-ops will union bust and not actually reinvest all the profits in community stuff. They will act like normal businesses sometimes, particularly if they're consumer co-ops and not worker co-ops. And that's the big difference there. So, which is why Richard Wolff is very explicit about it being these are worker co-ops,
worker directed
co-op strategy, and like this is. It's interesting, and that's kind of where you take the consumers out of it by going with a big retailer or buyer.
Sure.
But of course, that's also part of syndicalism, that you pretty much you have big producers that are syndicated, and you have big consumers that are the buyers are syndicated. That way, it's facilitated, and you're not really using markets anymore. Though, obviously, the buyers are all working in a market.
Sure. All right, well, let's finish this up because we don't have much time left.
Any of this before you moved here?
That's actually one of my favorite parts about Twin Oaks. It's like almost like a trade school. It's like you can come here and learn about gardening or woodworking or carpentry or animal husbandry or taking care of kids. It's like an endless list of things that you can learn and get better at, and if you want to take with you back into the world.
The average stay at Twin Oaks is 10 years, and most residents don't seem in a hurry to get back to the real world.
My parents were, go to school, get good grades, get into college.
I'm not sure how this is not the real world.
And a lot of millennials, a lot of people.
You're not sure how what?
This is not, to say this, they're not going back to the real world. This is the real world. What's so unreal about it?
Yeah, they definitely are treating it like, this is a fantasy la la land. It can't possibly work for everybody.
Outside of rural areas,
Yeah.
Tell that to Republic Windows and all the other co-ops.
People our age in the mainstream, that's what they did all their lives, follow somebody else's plan.
That was one of the things that I fell in love with the most early on was basically the lack of hierarchy here. And I worked a lot of jobs up until here that, go through your grind and work up the ladder and say all the right things and all that bullshit. It's just a beautiful thing when you're working alongside people and not feeling like you're on this lower rung.
What is dating and sex like in a commune?
I think there's a lot less focus on monogamy in the commune than there is definitely in the mainstream, which is actually another reason that I wanted to live here, because I think there's a lot of problems with monogamy.
What about a male perspective?
When it comes to relationships here, they can be very tough. You can get into a relationship, and then when the relationship ends, if it's not on good terms, you're stuck with that person. They're here and they're ingrained in your life.
And they might start dating your best friend.
Sometimes the pool is exhausted and you're just waiting for new people to come around to see if there's anyone you click with.
Admission at Twin Oaks is rolling. To join, prospective members come for a 3-week visiting period and then give the community 1 month to decide on their application. The criteria seems to be mostly if they vibe with the rest of the community or not. Twin Oaks isn't looking to fill out some survivalist dream team. Most people learn all the skills they need to work on Twin Oaks after they arrive. Twin Oaks has endured not just because of disciplined work schedules and prudent spending, but because of their lucky partnerships with corporate America. Without Pier 1, they likely would have died out, along with so many other 1960s experiments in communal living. The great irony of residents' decision to opt out of mainstream capitalism is that they didn't really opt out at all. They just participate in a different way.
In the global war of ideas, capitalism has won. The other ideas have lost. And so what we're wrestling with in our global culture is what brand of capitalism is going to win. Twin Oaks runs capitalist business. We sell our stuff out in the mainstream market. What we are doing is taking the capitalist system and providing more direct, immediate control.
Isn't that fun?
So that last answer from that guy, really kind of hit with me when I first watched this video that like, well, maybe as much as I want to do these kinds of projects, I want to do them where I am, because otherwise I think there's this defeatism that's kind of sinking in. But maybe when there's like 4 types of leftists, you know, there's and this is something that Lucky Black Cat has basically gone through with her recent videos, going through all the different types of socialism today, that there are, you know, non-revolutionary hierarchical leftists and non-hierarchical leftists. And then there's revolutionary hierarchical and non-hierarchical leftists. And the co-op strategy is basically that of the solidarity economy, and all the things we're kind of covering are they're the non-hierarchical grassroots, but non-revolutionary. Even maybe there's some revolutionary thinking involved. It isn't revolutionary strategy or action. Non-hierarchical revolutionary leftists are your anarchist cells, but they're doing direct action and things like that.
Sure.
And then there's the hierarchical revolutionary socialists, which are the very fringe, you know, unionizing groups and so on, which don't really have a consistent or cohesive project. You know, they think they have a project, but they don't know what the fucking subject is that they're trying to organize, or they do, but it's not clear like how they're actually implementing it. I put myself between, you know, I see myself as revolutionary, but in between hierarchical and non-hierarchical. But I also like all the solidarity economy stuff, but I recognize that it's just not, and a lot of people, you could subdivide the people in that quadrant as either they're there because they see it as the only safe, practical option. Otherwise, they would be more revolutionary. Or those that are there and they're not revolutionary and they're just like, revolution sucks. We should never do it. If anyone in my solidarity economy project starts talking about doing direct action, I'm gonna call the cops on them or something. or you know, I don't want them to ruin what we've got here. You know, we don't want the city going against us. We want a positive relationship with the cops, with the city. We can't, you know, suddenly, you know, we can't actually be politically independent in a way. We have to keep our head down. Now, Quadrant Jackson, I think, is probably the model that maybe goes against what I'm saying, where they could be both a combative force in city politics and everything else, and being resistance and doing all the stuff that they can bring a lot of different people in who aren't Malcolm X, you know, in incarnates. Those are the things that I'm trying to work out for myself as I listen to various YouTubers and sometimes streamers, but most of them are entertainers, so they're not even talking about practice at all. If they are, it's practice, but within the internet and media.
Right.
That's what they're doing. And that's what you can speak to, but
that's what gets the eyeballs. Yeah.
It's not doing anything.
Sure.
Which is why I both like Demon Mama, because she said she's a communist and she's honest about being an entertainer. But then I dislike her because that is all she is.
Yeah. When it comes down to like real ideas and stuff, she's, you know, I don't think she's refined her ideas and perspective all that well.
And she admits that. She admits that she's sort of like both. But I don't know, like, how is she growing? She doesn't do readings and things on stream. She's not.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
compare her to Sophie from Mars, another trans woman who is actively doing activist things and
I tend to like
organizers,
more. Right?
And so I like Sophie from Mars a lot more.
Absolutely.
Mildred and what they do with them.
Yep.
They're a good anecdote to streamers who are kind of doing the cool things, or doing the lame things. And Hassan is his own thing because he's the bro whisperer. He can, you know, he doesn't communicate deeply because if
he serves his purpose,
he would lose his audience. His audience of bros would just scatter. He wouldn't hold. So
he's about making leftism look attractive.
I understand why he goes no further than whatever rhetoric he uses.
Right.
It's just so cringe though when like he does things that show how much of a himbo he is. Where it was a video where he takes a geography test or a game where you have to pick countries, and he was just He was a 5-year-old. He
Oh my
He
God.
actually didn't know where any country was besides Turkey.
Oh my God.
It was literally like Pakistan, and he was like panicking. And no matter what country it was, it was just like, I don't know if it was an act, but it was like, it seemed like an act, but it was also too pathetic to be an act. He wasn't selling it as an act, but it was like, it was Pakistan. He was clicking everything around except India. Oh no, he was clicking even India. And it
Oh
was
my
like, where's
God.
Pakistan? Where's Pakistan? Is it this? Is it that? It's like, come on, dude. You talk about news and shit. Surely you know where
Yeah,
things
I mean, that's
are.
surprising. He
This
covers
is
world
yeah,
politics.
this is what, like, it was surprising, if anything, but it was so
Yeah.
crazy. It was just like, it seemed like a game, but it was
Maybe it was. Who
maybe
knows
it's
with
a way
him?
of making his audience feel better that, like,
Yeah.
he's dumber than I am. But then of course
Mhm.
then he shit talk him, and then he has to like explain socialism, and then he seems to have no credibility.
Hmm.
It's just an odd thing.
It is. Yes, indeed. Yeah, but there are some better ones out there that and it's usually the ones that are actually organizing on the ground too. People like Anarch, that's another good one to follow.
Overthrow Media.
Seriously Wrong
Seriously Wrong,
podcast.
yeah.
That's
So
another
they
good
actually
one
ran
too.
for office back in the
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
They live in Hamilton, I guess, or Toronto.
Cool.
And but there's a guy, Overthrow Media.
Yeah, I've heard that name
rapper
before.
stuff, and he does prison abolitionist work, and he can point to the things that his little clique accomplished.
That's
And
cool.
it is sort of a clique, or at least it's an affinity group, doing direct action, because they actually do like protest, or they do things outside of the prison or whatever. Sometimes disruptive. It's got to go to him, but he doesn't rub me the right way all the time, because he kind of excludes a lot of other tactics and strategies, but at least he's consistent. So anyway, we reached 10
Very cool.
o'clock for me anyway, and I
All
have an
right.
interview in the morning. I'm interviewing a lot of different state positions, but half of them are HR positions, and I don't want to. I'm starting to not want to go to an HR position, so I'm thinking I'm going to be way more selective with which positions. But it's basically doing a very similar kind of work that I'm doing now, but getting $15,000 more.
Oh, nice.
So, like, I kind
Well,
of
geez, good luck to you.
I kind of need to go through these motions of the civil service ladder. I don't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
want to leave where I am.
Hey,
But I
$1,000 a month extra. That could make some change.
This is the first year I have ever paid taxes. It was only $100, but it was the first time I actually had to pay taxes.
Wow. Well, hey. Well,
And whatever. So yeah. Any concluding thoughts on what we've covered today?
no, this was all very good. I liked it a lot, and yeah, restorative justice, definitely one of those areas I need to learn more about. Good to get
It's
some of
just
those
as
introductions.
legitimate as a force of action as anything economic or social. In fact, it's probably more important, because, like, to really break down the hierarchical relationships, we need to push on those fronts if we're going to really get that 15-year turn where it's no longer argued in the mainstream if trans people are dangerous or a threat,
Yeah, right.
or a problem.
Right.
In the same fashion that if gay people were a problem, because if you look at the timeline from the AIDS crisis, where it was, you could say, genocide against gay men, to 2012, where the Supreme Court overrules the gay marriage bans that red states passed in 2004 as a
Right.
wedge issue, which was made a wedge issue by us radical leftists in the Green Party, who made it. We cost the Democrats the 2004 election. You can blame us for that, I guess.
Yeah.
But we made
John Kerry cost them the
gay
election. Let's be real.
rights, but we were the ones making gay rights, putting it in the mainstream conversation. Now, of course, that means you're going to get a backlash and reaction, but you have that fight. Having the fight, I mean, there is a rhetoric about having the fight is a victory in itself. And
Absolutely.
that's something that Democrats,
Bringing it to the conversation.
whether it be
Yeah.
SOC Dems even, they don't want to fight. They really
I know.
don't. and
Yeah.
and even not any kind of non-revolutionary work. It just doesn't seem like they don't want to fight, even when they want to do community things, but they don't want to fight, and that's suspect to me. Puts me on edge. I don't like, I could like in the future they might turn me in, or
Yeah.
or the project will be dropped if it becomes inconvenient in some way.
Yeah, I agree.
Once the state starts paying attention to it or something.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean if their vision is even turning the US into like a Scandinavian liberal paradise, I mean all of those reforms were fought for at one time or another too. They don't just happen through
And
polite
now
campaigns.
things are just as neoliberal there as they are here.
Right.
As
Yeah,
far
this is
as
definitely eroding.
they've been cutting back those
hmm
programs. And things in Scandinavia maybe aren't so great.
Yeah. Not as much as they used to be. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, it's because
That's
it was being pushed to revolution. I covered this in my show,
Right.
by the way, an article about just how big the general strike was in Sweden that got the social welfare state going. It was a compromise. That was the compromise. So we're revolutionary socialists working. So there need to be enough of us being revolutionary. We're actually going to get the compromise.
Yeah.
Just as in 2020, we got the compromise of some less cops actually, and changing society enough that people don't want to be cops, and they're all complaining about how no one wants to be cops. It's good. I mean, it's sort of good.
Yeah.
So anyway,
But it just shows the problem with reformism in general is that no matter how good things get, they can always be rolled back in a system that allows it. So what do you do?
All right, man. Good night.
All right. Have a good night. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That was Dan Platt of the Three Lefts Show and What's Left in Albany. You can check out his work at threelefts.news. That's kind of the landing page for all things Dan. And we will return in a couple weeks to talk more about organizing tactics and that sort of thing. Let's see. Just going to shout out someone on Twitch this time. We won't do a raid. Let's see who's on right now, who is worth your attention. It has been a while since I've shouted out Actual Jake, so I will do that presently. So go check out this channel. He's a funny guy. He's definitely on the more entertainment side of the spectrum, more so than hardcore politics, but he will keep you laughing, and he will make fun of all the same people that you probably like to make fun of on the right. So here you go. Check out Actual Jake, and see you guys perhaps tomorrow night. I haven't decided if I'll do a stream or not, but look forward to future streams.